This episode is being brought to you by Diesel Fuel Prints. Diesel Fuel has been in the sticker business since 1991, and he's been printing all my stickers since the early 2000s. DieselFuelPrints.com always uses the highest quality weatherproof material, full color printing, 125 black and white stickers starts at just $25, and easy online ordering at DieselFuelPrints.com will get you a quote on a sticker of any shape and size you can think of. Shipping's always free, and listeners of this show will get a 10% discount if they use the promo code AWP 2021. So go check out Diesel Fuel for your sticker needs. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anyway Whatever podcast. I'm your host, Mike Fisher, and today's guest is musician and author Matt Harvey. Matt is primarily known as a heavy metal musician. His main band is the death grind band Exhumed, who are my favorite all-time American death metal band. I absolutely love Exhumed. If you know me, you know that. Me and Matt have been friends for a long time. He's one of my favorite people, and this is a good episode that just sounds like what it would be like if you were sitting around having a couple beers with me and Matt Harvey, because this is we talked for like 2 hours and I had to edit it down. This is another episode where, there's no beginning and, I don't really announce when the episode's starting. We were talking and rolling, and I didn't want to give up a bunch of stuff we'd already talked about in our little warm up phase. So, we just roll with it. Matt also writes, and over the course of the years, he'll send me stuff that he's written for me to read. And he finally has gotten something published, and I really wanted to have him come on and talk about the story he has in this anthology that's coming out. It's a great story. It fits in really well with all of the stuff that goes along with Matt Harvey's bands. Great episode, and I think everybody's, a lot of my friends and fans, the people who listen to the show, are familiar with Matt already. But even if you don't care about death metal, listen, it's a great episode. And we cover a ton of different ground. And yeah, as always, the stuff for the show is down below in the description, links to Matt's stuff and my merch and advertisers and all the other information about the show. Great episode. Like I said, check it out with Matt Harvey right on the other side.
It's weird because I'm always shitting on the 90s, but there was some pretty dope shit in the 90s. So that was a cool trend. Like there was some good movies and shit for sure.
Well, for death metal guys, there was a weird void for a few years where everything sucked, or not very much good stuff was coming out, or the good bands were not putting out good stuff. And so when you think back from a death metal perspective, you're like, the 90s sucked.
Well, it was like the beginning. It was like the mother load. And then by the time I graduated high school in 93, it was like, wow.
And it didn't really come back until like the late 90s, really.
Yeah.
And
it was like Nasm came out, Nile, Dying Fetus, and Exhumed. That was like the sort of, an Angel Corpse, Chrysian. That was like the sort of
Angel Corpse. I love
death
Angel
metal
Corpse.
Reawakening. I love Angel Corpse too.
Angel Corpse is one of those bands that's like, they're so furious that it's jarring. You know what I mean? It's like there's so much thrash in there on top of like the death metal that it's like a fury. Oh yeah, that band fucking rips.
Yeah, I thought they were like the band Morbid Angel could have been, which I'm sure people might take offense to, but that's kind of how I looked at it.
I mean, I think that's fair enough. Angel Corpse, yeah, I haven't thought about them for a minute. Oh God.
I make these Spotify playlists, and I like in the last
week.
In the last year and a half, I've listened to probably more death metal than I have in like 5 years, because I haven't been playing it all the time and going on tour with death metal bands and stuff. And so I was kind of getting tired of my, like, I have like an 86 to 90 playlist and a 91 to 95 playlist. So I was like, fuck it. I'm going to make a 96 to 2000 playlist. I'm going to challenge myself. And that's when I kind of was like, oh yeah, Angel Corpse was like a really good band. I kind of forgot that they were a thing, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I guess we can be doing the episode now if we want. We're kind of already. I'll just like in the intro part, I'll just be like, there's no real intro. It's just us fucking shooting the shit. Right. But I'm pretty happy with like the current new generation of death metal bands. Like, it's one of those things where as an old guy, I would have not expected to latch on to much new death metal. It's like, I just want to listen to Asphyx records and Bolt Thrower records and, right. and like Exhumed and Entombed and all of those bands. And just like leave the new stuff to the kids, and but it's like, fucking Necrot. That band fucking rules, dude. You know what I mean? Like Tumult fucking rules. Like there's so many good new death metal bands, Undergang, and like, it's crazy, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, I also have a new like 21st century death metal playlist, and it's full of all that stuff. And whenever Undergang comes on, I'm like, ooh, this is the good stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, it's Undergang, of course.
They're so filthy, dude. It's fucking amazing. It's just like, yeah, it's like if part of death metal is to be like just kind of mildly offensive by its existence, like Undergang fulfills that. Just like totally. From the way they like you start listening, you're like, oh that's
like I might need to gnarly. Take a shower after this, and that's how like Mike Abominator from Gravehill, his band Ruin is like same thing. It's just totally. Like real ugly, like
dude, that band fucking rules. The fucking lineup of dudes in that band is
who's I know it's him,
Christian,
and is it still Steve?
Steve Nelson, and it's like, dude, and then Mike. That's like a good band, dude.
Right? It's all bros, just doing good stuff.
That's the thing that's funny is like, we've been doing this shit for a long time. Like, all of our friends do cool shit all the time. It's amazing.
And it's kind of inspiring, just to like see what your friends are up to and be like, wow, holy shit, that's cool. It just kind of keeps you on your toes and, helps you think like, oh, if these guys can still keep at it, if they got gas in the tank, then, I must have gas in the tank too,
Dude, totally. I definitely, I'm not done talking about death metal. I don't think, but
I'm never done talking about it. That's fine.
I know that you've been writing, and we talked like a year ago when I was first starting the podcast, and we recorded an episode that didn't really quite make the quality cut as far as the sound was concerned. But we had talked a little bit at that point about this novella that you wrote. That's going to be it's like part of an anthology of some kind. What is all that? What's the name of the anthology? And your story is called The Vessel, right?
My story is called The Vessel. The book is called Horrorama, and it's published by Grindhouse Press, and it contains 3. They call them novellas. I don't know. I guess they're like, is it a short story? Is it a novella? I don't know. I don't know exactly what the categorization is, but between 3 of them, it's about the size of like a, 260 page books. So they're fairly substantial short stories, I guess. And mine's called The Vessel, and it's like a kind of cosmic horror detective gross out story. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good summation of the storyline. Is it your first published thing?
It is, yeah. In terms of like a fiction story, it is. So,
it came out around Halloween time.
Yeah, it came out right around Halloween of last year.
Yeah.
And it's just I've been like right after the book came out. Like my wife and I bought a condo, so it's like I've been making records kind of nonstop. So it's like I have this thing I'm writing and I keep turning to it. And I'm like, oh, by the time I like read through what I already have, add like, a page and a half, then it's like, okay, well, by the time I come back to this in a month, it's going to take me 2 hours just to read back through what I have. So it's been kind of tough to turn my attention back to it, but I definitely, I'm definitely looking forward to doing more. And, people seem to mostly like the story. And, well, I mean, it's hard to really get a handle for it, because
I know. Trust me. You never know if people are just like, well, you're my friend, Matt Harvey, and I love you. And so I liked your book. I liked your story very much. It's like,
right.
we all live in that space as creative people. Like you just have to, I guess, like you just have to be happy that your friends are nice to you sometimes.
Right.
I loved the story. I'm not trying to imply that I did not. I absolutely loved it. And one of the things we were kind of talking about it a little bit right in the beginning is like, that'll probably get chopped off is, like when I was reading the first opening, like chapter, I was like literally sitting there smiling to myself. I'm like, yes, this is totally, and I didn't, it was like, this is what I expected. Right. And then once it gets past that and it gets into the actual story, cause that's just kind of like almost like an opening scene. And
right.
then from there you move into kind of, why that scene actually exists. And,
right.
and then it turns into like a gritty cop, detective thing and, like supernatural stuff. It's really good, dude. I really like the way that you, to kind of talk about, we were talking about movie stuff, like 90s movies. It was almost like it's almost like you got like a roll around from the front to the back.
Right. Right.
Well, and I like that it took place in Northern California,
Of course. Well, right what
that's what they say.
I think, all my favorite stuff, whether it's a movie or a comic or a book or whatever, I shouldn't say all my favorite stuff, but a lot the stuff that kind of grabs me as far as like fun reading, like nobody's reading a book of horror novellas and thinking it's that you're getting like Beckett or James Joyce or whatever, or Dostoevsky. Like if it's Dostoevsky, I'm like, well, I'll bear through 200 pages and like, I'll get into this eventually. And then I always do. But in terms of like, kind of like pop lit or whatever, I like something that just has opening scene that's just like holy shit, and I was thinking of it very much like a movie. Like if you go to a horror movie, it's like set the tone right away and then kind of let it go.
No, it worked really well, and I could see it working kind of as either as like a film or even as like and this is the thing that needs to come back also, speaking of old school shit, is like an anthology film, like
right.
They used to do with Stephen King stuff, like Creepshow and stuff.
Creepshow, yeah.
If you turned that book into, 3 short films and made it one actual anthology movie, it would fit perfectly. I mean, it'd be really good.
Well, hey, if anybody at Blumhouse was watching, listening, just hit me up.
Dude, you know what? I have to tell you, I don't even know at this point who is listening, because I get totally random people like hitting me up and being like, yeah, dude, I totally love your show. And I'm like, what? Cool. And it'll be like, like I have a guest coming on very soon, who I've recorded an episode with. It's like the drummer from Less Than Jake, like how did that dude know about my show? You know what I mean? And like he owns a record label, and the label got a hold of me. Is like, yeah, Vinny wants to be on. And I was like, okay, okay, of course.
That's perfect, man. That's great.
Oh yeah. So you never know.
Yeah.
I have literary agents like actually contact me about having authors that they represent on the show.
Very cool. Very
it's
cool.
Fucking crazy.
Well, good thing my publicist reached out to you.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you got to grease palms, Harv.
Right.
Sometimes you do. But have you always kind of? I mean, anybody who's in a band like Exhumed, and the lyrics that you write, and being in like a death metal band with like a horror theme and stuff, I assumed at some level you've always wanted to write? And is it one of those things you've always wanted to do and you're just getting around to, or is it something you've always done and you're just now getting around to trying to do it in a published manner?
It's more of something I've always wanted to do, and I'm just sort of now getting around to it. I started writing more regularly or more seriously a few years ago. In addition to horror and stuff, I've always been like a huge comic book nerd. That was like when I was a little kid, it was like, especially Marvel, but Marvel and DC comics, D&D, and horror movies, Toxic Avenger and Reanimator and all those 80s gore fests. And so those are sort of my three interests. And I started writing because I was on tour and I was sleeping in the van. The van's always moving. So you don't get a lot of really deep sleep, but you kind of get a lot of REM sleep. And I just had this weird dream about like a superhero crossover story. And I woke up and I thought like, wow, that was a really fun dream. Like, how could that happen? And then I just sort of started writing it just to pass time on tour. And I was like, well, this is a really good use of time in the van. Like, this is what I should have been doing this whole time, just sitting there with my laptop.
For the last 25 years of your life.
Right. And so that's kind of what that's my main like writing time or whatever, is just on tour, just driving around. And
there's endless hours to kill when you are on tour.
Exactly.
People always think it's like fucking nonstop party train, bro. And it's like, no, it's just a endless parade of shitty bathrooms, shitty food, hot van, and then like cold an van. Hour of having fun.
Right. I mean, I have fun,
of course,
most of the day being at the show and stuff, but there is just a lot of time spent just getting places,
Yeah.
So
and then once you're there, you load in, and then you've got hours to do whatever.
To do fuck all, So I just found it was a really constructive way to kind of just stay mentally engaged and wait to crack the first beer until like 6:30 p.m. kind of thing. And so that's just kind of been how I turned to it. And I started kind of with the idea of wanting to write comic book scripts. And
you sent me one some time ago, and it's been a while, and I got started on it, but I don't think I ever finished it. But
I've just turned to prose because it's just easier, because you don't have to find an artist and pay an artist, and it just seemed a little bit easier to meet people in that world. Obviously I have something published, and we're not sitting here talking about a comic book. So, and so so I've kind of just turned to prose because it's something I can do completely by myself. I don't have to wait, be like, cool, can you draw this for me? Like I'm okay at drawing, but I'm certainly not good enough, nor do I have the time to get good enough to like draw a 26-page comic and yada yada yada. That's just too much.
Yeah, I mean, we've been friends for a long time. We've had a lot of discussions about comic book stuff. I'm not like a super huge fan of comic books. The stuff I like tends to be like, like I like, of course, I can never come up with names when I'm sitting here trying to think of it. The Humans, I like a lot. I know the band Ghoul. Ghoul's a little bit in that mix with
right.
I like the Humans a lot. I think that's a cool book, and it's actually like I think I have all the hard or the anthology versions, the collection versions of that comic, and like like Jeff Darrow, like Hard Boiled and stuff. Like
that was a great book.
That is my favorite comic. Period.
I think that whole realm is like perfect for you, but just not what mainstream comics is about. Like I could see you loving heavy metal and eerie and creepy and mad and cracked and all of that stuff.
I have a subscription to Mad Magazine.
There you go.
It's still to this day.
just not, you don't really care about like, the Scarlet Witch's love life and how the Avengers are going to like go to space to like fight some guy in a purple outfit or whatever.
Yeah, no, I don't.
Which I totally
superhero
respect.
Comics.
I
don't
totally respect.
And I think it's awesome that people do. Like, I'm not one of those people who's like, I don't like it, so I think you're a dork for liking it. I mean, I do think you're a dork.
I am a dork for liking it. It's totally okay.
Yeah, I mean, most of you are, but that's again, that's okay, and it's an endearing quality to all of my friends who are comic book people, because I have a lot of them, right? Because I was in video games forever.
Sure.
and you know, I've been a professional illustrator for, you know, 25 plus years. Like, of course, most of my friends are comic book people, you know,
Right.
so it's, you know, I don't judge. But yeah, like, of course, like, you know, like eerie, creepy, you know,
Sure.
all that stuff. Like, I love all that stuff for sure. Like when I was talking to Chet Zar, yeah, like we talked a little bit about like if I was a little kid at the grocery store and my mom was like, okay, you got a couple bucks to go get something. I was like, I would run over to the comic book, you know,
The spinner
rack, the spinner rack. And it was like, where's the horror stuff? If there's no horror stuff, I'd probably try to get some like war comic or something, but I never was like, I'm going to buy Spider-Man, you know, like it was never going to happen like that. And then, or, you know, that was just, I think that was, I don't know why. Even as a kid, I think that what I figured out really quickly was that those superhero comics were an ongoing story.
Yes.
And that I wasn't a frequent enough purchaser of comic books that I could ever keep up with the story. And I felt like, well, if I get something that has art in it that I think is cool, then at least I have that. You know what I mean? And it's like, I think that's where it came from. And then when I was a teenager and I was determining myself to end up becoming an illustrator, like I want to draw things for a living. You know, I had friends that were, you know, skateboard friends or punk rock friends who were comic book collectors. And I would always go to the comic book shop with them. And I would always trying to find the thing. It's like, well, I want to get into it, but
what's the thing that's going to hook you? Yeah. Yeah.
And then to even tie back to what I just said, like I would be like, oh, this comic's really cool. And then I'd look and it's like, oh, there's like 150 issues ahead of this one that I'm looking at. And I'm never going to, as much as I want to, I'm never going to go back and get them. And so it was like, I could never get into it from that level of investment. You know what I mean? But there were things that I liked that, you know, like I really liked, like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles when it first came out. I remember like going into the comic book store and like the first like photocopied editions, you know, and it was like, yeah, this stuff's totally rad. And it was this weird.
Bought those and held on to them.
Yeah, I have friends who did for sure. Yeah, it's like, you know, it's like I should have bought Bitcoin, you know, in 2010 too. But.
I think when I was a little kid, sometimes I'd watch soap operas with my mom. And I remember getting pretty involved in some of the storylines and like All My Children and One Life to Live. And there was one other one that
Days of Our Lives. That was my mom's one.
Yeah. And so I guess to me, it sort of made total sense that this is going to be like an ongoing soap opera. And I guess I had positive memories of just like spending time with my mom. And actually I remember getting like one of my first boners watching a soap opera when I was like really, really young, like 4 years old, 5 years old. And I asked my mom, like, Mom, how come every time the pretty ladies start kissing, my penis gets big? And she was like, we'll talk about that later. So I guess, you know, I like that kind of serialized storytelling. And I love the Spider-Man cartoon. So it was kind of like, oh, this is like the perfect.
Yeah, that makes way more sense to me. Is like, you know, I definitely watched like the Justice League and shit when I was a kid on Saturday morning cartoons.
That's what they were called when we were kids. Yeah.
Was it the Super Friends or what? Yeah, but they hung out at the Hall of Justice,
right?
Or the League
Meanwhile,
of Justice.
At the Hall of Justice. Pew,
yeah,
pew, pew, stars.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think I liked it from that angle, and then the Spider-Man show was like its own like entity,
right?
It had the amazing fucking intro song and shit. Yeah, you know, I guess I liked it from that angle.
I mean, when Ralph Bakshi took over animating it, and it's like the New York skyline is like,
I don't remember that
psychedelic, like bizarre, like painting splatter.
I need to see that because I don't recall that because Ralph Bakshi is definitely one of my lifetime art heroes, and if you don't follow him on Facebook, you should, and anybody listening should follow Ralph Bakshi on Facebook because he just posts all the time, like old
Really?
art from his productions, like just background paintings and like some of the most insanely cool art I see posted on Facebook is posted by Ralph, and it's like, oh, it's
I mean,
so
it makes
good.
a lot of sense. Actually, I watched or I rewatched Fire and Ice a couple of years ago. And I
Same.
was like, damn, I forgot how badass this was, man. This is so cool.
Fucking Frank Frazetta, man. He's,
Right?
you know, it's been discussed on this show before, like that. I think, Frank Frazetta is probably the most talented artist this country's ever produced, regardless of genre of art. Like his skill level is so insane to me. Like it's incredible. Like Frazetta is, like him and Norman Rockwell, are like, as far as I'm concerned, they're probably the two greatest artists ever.
And that's so
be
awesome
produced.
because they're at such opposite ends of the spectrum. One guy, paints a cop like giving a kid a milkshake, and another guy paints like a chick with a big old ass, like with a fucking sword against a lizard man in a swamp. And it's so great.
Yeah, I mean,
Wonderful dichotomy.
they both live in the same space in my mind, you know. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, I have this Norman Rockwell book that I swear to God it weighs fucking 30 pounds. It's gigantic. And it's like, you can't store it anywhere. It's the most inconvenient book that's ever been made. And my wife is constantly like, what? It's like always in the way of something, something that we're
put it
trying
on the coffee
to do.
table. You can't ever put any drinks or anything on here. Oh no, we'll put it under the coffee table. We can't put your feet there because it's fucking.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, I know one thing we can't do with it, and that's get rid of it. Like, I will never get rid of that fucking book for any reason. It's like even as a little kid, up until like now, like I look at the art inside of that book and Norman Rockwell's work, and it's like, I am a professional artist and illustrator. I know how to do all of these things. And I look at his work and I'm like, I don't know how he did all the things that he did. I just don't know how he captured things the way that he did. And like, his work is incredible. And it's like the same thing with Frazetta. And the thing that Frazetta that like just kills me when I start thinking about it is like, he's just as good at inking illustrations as he is at painting. Right. You know what I mean? And then like, and then he had a stroke and then he taught himself to paint with his left hand just as good as he'd painted his entire life with his right hand. Or I can't remember which one was which. He may have been lefty and had to reteach himself with his right hand. I can't remember, but yeah. And it's like, it's crazy. It's crazy to me,
I mean, it's humbling, but it's also inspiring, It's
totally.
Like, you're like, wow. That's pretty amazing. And like I said, luckily for us, Frazetta decided to paint barbarians and fucking half naked women and monsters.
Heavy metal shit.
It's great. I love it.
Well, and that kind of like my interest in that stuff as a preteen going into my teen years, and then like I was pretty heavily into the punk scene, so I didn't get into metal stuff very much until the later part of the 80s, like 87, 88. But, I like worked in the mall and there was like a Walden's Books. And when I was on my lunch break, I would go, I know, right? Dating myself a little bit. There were these things called bookstores, and inside of them, you could buy brand new books.
And even magazines.
Yes, all kinds of stuff. And, I'd go into like the art book section and it was like, Frazetta books and Vallejo and then there were like all those Michael Whalen books, and then just after I found like Michael Whalen, it was like you started getting you'd see his work on a Sepultura record cover, you'd see his work on an Obituary record cover, and it was like I was already familiar with his work, and when it started showing up in death metal, I think that was definitely one of those things that helped me bond to it a little bit, as I was like, oh, like I already understood the visual language, right? Because I was already well versed in all of that type of work, and I like one of those weird things where like once I got bit by a heavy metal bug, like I got bit.
Why did I
really
wait so
bad.
long?
Well, it was like you weren't allowed. You know what I
Right.
mean? And it sounds stupid, but like, you know, in the early 80s, if you were hardcore punk, like there were like
Dude.
3 bands you were allowed to listen to. You could listen to Venom, you could listen to Iron Maiden, and you could listen to Motorhead. But outside of that, metal was like off. It was
Right.
like off the menu. And it was like, that's what BMXers listen to. And if you're a punk, you do not ride a BMX bike. You
No,
ride a
you ride a
skateboard. And it was
skateboard.
like these two
Yes.
like camps, like completely separate from each other. And then, you know, and then you got the crossover stuff, and then it was over.
Right.
Like all of the hardcore bands started becoming metal bands, and all of the metal bands started incorporating hardcore in them. And it was, you know, now, and then we got death metal and grindcore and blah, 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 blah.
And now it's a much better world. But yeah, it is. It's really weird sometimes, you know, trying to explain to kids, like, it just sounds so dumb. You're like, well, I don't know. Back, like, before I really got into this, like, I knew that, like, skaters and like rockers used to, like, they have fights like behind the school and stuff. And like that was just what they did, you know. Like if you were into metal, like you carried a comb in your back pocket and you had like a real shitty like 7th grade mustache, you know. These are all the kids who are like a little bit older than me kind of thing. And you know, it was very cool kind of in the 86, 87 when you know, people started breaking down those boundaries, you know, Metallica, Exodus, DRI, Suicidal, and
Yeah.
kind of cross-pollinating, you know. Slayer obviously was a big
Slayer
one
was
too.
like kind of one of the first ones. Like once I heard Hell Awaits, I was like, oh shit. Well, actually, I take that back, because I had a friend at school who, in high school, who was into that stuff like before anybody. And when I was trying to form No Warning, a mutual friend of me and this guy Jeff was like, you got to go talk to Jeff. He plays guitar and he likes a lot of the stuff that you do. I'm oh, he's like a punk. And he's like, no, he's like a total hesher. But you got to go talk to him. He's super cool. He likes a lot of cool stuff. And so, like, you know, got the introduct and went over to his house, and it was like, you know, he was the kid at high school in 1985 who was dressed like Kerry King with fucking upside down cross gauntlets and shit like that.
So
you know
he's
what
a
I mean?
winner is what you're saying. He's a total fucking winner.
And you know, so went over to his house, and like, you know, I was like a little Mohawk kid and was looking through his record collection, and it was like all these bands that you know, it was like I knew Venom, I knew Iron Maiden, and I knew, like, I was like, oh yeah, those, you know, I'm familiar, blah, blah, blah. And then it was like, oh, it's this band Slayer. And he put on like Hell Awaits or Haunting the Chapel. And I was like, fuck, that's gnarly. And then like keep digging. It's like, he's got an Adolescence record. He's got GBH records. He's got all these hardcore punk records. And I was like, it took me a minute to figure out how those worlds mesh together, you know what I mean?
Right.
And then, you know, I'm looking at the back of Jump in the Fire, and it's like, you know, Hammett's wearing a fucking Discharge shirt, and I'm like, put this on. I was like, what is this? Put this on. I've got to hear a heavy metal band that wears Discharge shirts. Like, I got to hear this, you know what I mean? And it was like, it all started making sense. And then
Right.
it's also ended up being that, like, me and the bass player, No Warning, we're skate punks. You know, we were fucking Mohawk skate punks. And, you know, the guitar players were dudes who listened to Raven and fucking, you know, Yngwie Malmsteen.
It's always the guitar players,
Slayer,
the metal guys and punk
like,
bands.
you know, Jeff and Ryan, like they listened to all the stuff we listened to, and they listened to all of that metal stuff. And then, you know, our drummer was like a glam rock dude, you know, and that we went to high school with, who was like one of those guys who just, like, you know, it was like
such a jam, man.
Well, yeah, totally. It was like, you know, you go in his room and it was like, you know, Rat, you know, and Poison posters and stuff. And it was like, but then immediately, as soon as he heard the stuff that we had a drummer who was like a really good metal drummer. And he's like, I don't really want to play this fast music. Like, I don't want to play this thrashy fast stuff. He wanted to do more like, you know, King Diamond, Merciful Fate type of stuff. Cause he was fucking really good. He's like, my friend Tony, who actually went to our high school. He's like, you guys got to talk to Tony. And we're like, he's like a glam rock guy. You know, his hair's all fucking teased up and shit. And then he's like, no, Tony's fucking cool. And then once we started talking to Tony and he started hanging out and listening to the stuff we were listening to, he's like, I'm totally into it. Like, I'm all the way into it. And so it just ended up being like a really good mesh of like, the only reason that No Warning sounded exactly the way they did was because it was a total mesh of like those three things,
Right.
you know?
It's kind of like, reminds me of when Nuclear Assault got Glenn Evans from TT Quick. And I was like, wait, does they have the guy from TT Quick in the band? And then I heard, I was like, oh, this is fucking legit. Okay.
Right. I mean, you know, it would be weird shit like that back in the day, you know, where it'd be like someone just start playing with someone in it, you know, like it's like even like Pantera, like when Phil joined, it was like
they were still pretty glammy.
Yeah.
You know?
And then like overnight
Right.
it turned into Exhorder.
I think it's changed so much, you know, since then, in that I think people understand that you can go from band to band, and then like a guy plays style X and then joins, you know, whatever other band and plays subgenre Y, and it's not that big of a deal, because I kind of still have that thing, like, even with Necrot, like Sonny, the guitar player, he used to be in Saviors. And
wow, I didn't know that. Saviors are so good.
Right. I love Saviors. I love Sonny. But my first thought, I was like, what the fuck does Sonny from Saviors know about death metal? And then I heard Necron, and I was like, apparently a fucking lot.
He knows all of it.
But it was just a knee-jerk reaction from a totally different time, you know?
Man, I totally get it, dude. I totally get it. And like I remember and this actually pertains to Exhumed a little bit. I remember like in the early 2000s, like I was friends with Ross online, and I'd never met Ross. I knew his sister from growing up because we grew up in the same neighborhood, but Ross was like a little kid. I didn't know, you know. And so when I actually met Ross, I was like, he's like a crust punk. Like, what is a crust punk doing in like all these death metal bands? I didn't get it at first. You know what I mean? And then like because I was just coming back into it. I'd spent, you know, like 10 years being a dad, you know, like I had my first kid when I was 18, and then, you know, 10 years later, I'd just been being in dad mode. And so when I started getting back into like hanging out and not just doing the art, and hanging out and going to shows and seeing people and stuff, what I was unaware of was that how meshed together all of the scenes were. And it was like, you know, it was like the other part of the crust thing was like, they all like doom and stoner metal bands too. Like they were all into like High on Fire, and you know what I mean? And it was like, and then, you know, like guys that were playing black metal bands and death metal bands, and guys that would play in thrash metal bands, and you know, and it was like it was super weird how it was a weird learning experience to me, getting back into the scene and being like, oh, this is all one thing now. It's splintered into 500
so
genres, but it's all one thing now. Yeah,
it's so much better for everybody now, because you know, people just, you're not wasting your time sort of creating arbitrary divisions, and especially you know, I think once like metal kind of faded from the mainstream at the end of the beginning of the 90s, I should say, you know, after a few years of people being mad about it, they sort of realized that like getting mad, it's like religion almost, you know, like this like the warfare between different sects doesn't make any sense. It's because we all basically like the same stuff, you know, whether it's Maiden, Priest, Metallica, Slayer, Discharge, GBH, like these are sort of the building blocks that everybody can agree on. And it's like, cool, you're more into, you know, this little area that's not really my thing, but I'm not going to like fight you in the parking lot. I'm going to be like, hey, cool fellow guy that's into some of the things I'm into. Nobody else fucking likes this shit. Like, let's hang out, you know?
Well, yeah, it's like one of those things, like when you're in a venue watching bands, like every single person in there got there the same way. And it doesn't matter whether they're like a punk or crusty or fucking, you know, they're wearing like, you know, a death metal battle vest or whatever. It's like, if you're in that space, it could be even like the weird college bros that like don't look like they belong there at all. But everybody who got there in the same way for the same reason. And it's like, you just gotta like be stoked. I mean, at least that's my view of it.
Well, you know, I mean, it just comes down to like people who are fans of stuff, you know, they get so attached to their own experience with it. And it's like, it can be a beautiful thing, but it can also be like a really ugly thing because it's like, no, this isn't for you. It's for me. And it's like, oh, dude.
I so hate that gatekeeping shit. It's like, like one of the things that like drives me fucking crazy. And there's like funny memes and, you know, we all have female friends in the scene who their credibility cannot be fucking questioned, you know, but it's like a thing of like, you see somebody wearing a fucking shirt for a particular band. It's like,
oh, do you even like them?
Do you name 3 fucking songs? And it's like, fuck off. First of all, just right. And then for me, the thing, cause the one that I would always see all the time that really, opened my mind to the situation was like the Ramones. Like people would get fucking insane about like the fact you could buy a Ramones shirt at fucking Target. You know what I mean? And it's like, just fucking bullshit. And I seen this fucking lady in a fucking Ramones shirt. And it's like, or like a little kid in a Nirvana shirt. And it's like, I had this moment of like remembering when I was a little kid and like, you know, you would have friends and your friend would find something new, whether it was like a movie or a comic or a TV show or music or whatever it was. And then everybody in the friend group would try to experience that thing. And then it either would get rejected by the group or it would get absorbed by the group. And with punk rock, with me, like once I got it and it got absorbed kind of into my friend group, there were definitely some of the kids who were like, no, I do not like this. I'm going to go listen to Def Leppard records or whatever. So when I think about things like some kid or some person wearing a shirt or whatever, it's like if 100 kids buy a Ramones shirt that have never heard the Ramones just because it's cool, they think it's cool or whatever. If that launches one kid into a life of cool music, it's worth the other 99 fucking kids.
And
like,
the other thing is, like the thing that drives me insane is like, dude, I hate to break it to everybody out there, but like the Ramones and Nirvana, like that shit's been over for decades. You know what I mean? It's like somebody in the 80s getting mad about like, oh, this kid doesn't even know who Quicksilver Messenger Service are, man. What the fuck? And it's like,
but you know those people exist.
Who cares? Too. Like, who fucking cares? Like the bottom line is maybe like Joey Ramone's family, like gets a check every 6 months.
Yeah, for fucking
good for fucking them. Like, why shouldn't they? If people want it, great. And you know, the other thing is that somebody lame liking what you like doesn't take away from your enjoyment of it.
It doesn't diminish your personal taste. I think people feel like it diminishes their personal taste.
Right.
I had that. I definitely remember being a young dude having that moment with Metallica though. Sure. Like when Metallica turned into a thing, I was like, fuck all you all.
Well, but the part of my thing.
No, go ahead.
It's just like talking to people, you know, in the scene that are like 5-6 years older than me, that are like diehard metalers from like Ward One, is that every record they've put out, that exact same experience has happened. Like if you talk to like Scott and Matt from Repulsion, they're like, no, only the first album. Ride the Lightning is like a sellout. It's got that acoustic guitar bullshit and that Escape song. That sucks. I've got a friend that's like 8 years older than me. He's like, Master of Puppets was cool, but all these fucking dicks, losers at my school liked it. So fuck that album. And it's just a cost of success. You know, and I get it when you're like 13 to 16, maybe your whole life is music. You don't really have a voice. It's hard to like, you don't have your own money. You don't have your own car. You probably haven't gotten laid yet. Like this band is speaking for you. And then when they change, that hurts you. But once you're over like 16, it's like, you should have maybe a car, maybe a job, maybe a significant other, maybe your own band. Like you don't have to worry about what some people you've never met, will never meet, will never know. You don't have to worry about what they're doing. And I always tell kids like that they complain like, oh yeah, well the band sucks now. It's like, cool, you don't like it? Fucking make your own band. Like,
dude,
that's the perfect impetus to make your own fucking band. Don't sit there crying on the internet. But it's way worse nowadays because it's a bunch of guys our age, and
a bunch of young kids. It's like an endless parade of dickheads on the internet.
Asshole parade. And it's so far from just music. It's like sometimes I try to like get into like comic fandom boards and stuff.
Don't.
And I'm just like, dude, I can't. I cannot. I just can't.
I think the comic book people might be the worst. Like, I mean, or with the Star Wars people, like the Star Wars and the comic book people, like that, those fandoms, and it's like, I don't know how.
Apparently, video games is quite bad too, but I don't play video games, so
yeah.
And it's just like, oh, this is dumb. It's like, dude, this is not for you, man. This is just a medium that's designed for kids that all of us, myself included, along with the asshole, like we've dragged it with us into our adulthood. We've dragged it someplace it was never designed to go, and we're demanding that it conform to what we want, you know. And it's like it's, you know, I was talking with we're on tour with Black Dahlia Murder, like
I love that band.
And
I've had to defend that band to very good friends of mine way too many times in my life. I'm like, they sound just like fucking Carcass. Like, I don't know why you guys don't understand this.
And I was talking to him, and I was like, the bottom line is it would be weirder if the metal of now sounded exactly like the metal of the past. Like, and it's weird enough that there's so many bands that do that, but it's like that can't. If that's all there is, then there's the whole genre is dead, and that goes for comics or whatever, you know, movies. If all there is in a horror is another remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, then the fucking genre is over with. It should just stop. Because there has to be new idea, and some of them you won't like, and some of them you won't relate to because you're fucking old. Like, I'm 45, dude. I shouldn't know what the kids are into. I don't fucking know. Why would I don't even have kids. That's the only way I would have an idea of what kids like. So it's not for me, and I'm cool with that. Like, there's endless stuff out there from my generation that I love, and there's endless stuff people that are my age are making that I love and that I'm making, and it's like, great. Let the kids have it, you know?
Yeah, dude, totally. And it's like the kids who are making things now, like when you started Exhumed, there was nothing for you to, there wasn't a lot for you to base that on. Death metal was a new thing, you know, grindcore was a new thing. There wasn't 30 years or 40 years worth of those bands for you to draw influences on. And then you think about it even wider than that. There wasn't really any black metal. There wasn't really, like, there weren't all these genres that existed. You were making the genre, you know what I mean? And then it's like, so now you have all these kids who are making music, who have 40 years of underground extreme metal and punk to draw their influences from. And so, of course it's going to sound different. And that goes for all types of music now. Like, even hip hop draws from a completely different place than Run DMC did. You know what I mean? It's like, and so that's where I kind of get frustrated with the, you know, gatekeeper mentality, is it's like, you're judging this from a completely different fucking place. Like, I know it means a lot to you, and you're trying to hold on to something that was important, because a lot of us, you know, especially in the punk scene, like, who grew up in the 80s, like, you had to bleed for it. You left your house. Sure. There was a very good chance you were going to have a fucking confrontation with somebody, whether it was a fucking cop who was like, what are you doing in this neighborhood? Or some fucking suburban dad, or some, you know, fucking jock football players or whatever. Like, you left your house and you had colored hair, or like, it's just ubiquitous now.
Somebody
like,
was going to drive by you back then and just be like, hey, you fucking faggot. Like, as you're like walking
every
down the street.
single day,
Yes.
somebody called me a faggot and threw something at me in my
Right.
neighborhood in suburban San Jose. You know what I mean? And it's like, so I get why some people are so tied to what these things mean to them. I get it. It's just like, but at the same time, like, have a little fucking perspective about things. You know what I mean? Like, the world as it exists now, and the people who are creating things are creating it from a completely different place than where you started. And, you know, like, fucking get on board with life,
Right.
man. Like,
Well, and the other thing is, though, the fact that a little kid can have a mohawk, or anybody can be covered in tattoos or whatever. Like, the fight that all those punk rockers and alternative people, whatever you want to call them, subculture people in the 80s, they won. That means you won. You won.
Right.
It's totally okay to have pink hair, have tattoos. You could be a mom, you could be a chef, you could be a college professor, and have a fucking mohawk and be covered in tattoos. Like, we won. So enjoy the victory. Don't get mad because some kid doesn't like. I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Yeah, I know. It's rough.
To walk
Man.
down the
Let me
street
tell
and
you.
get ridiculed.
Dude, I remember one time, like, walking down the street to my friend's house, like over by Oak Ridge Mall, like total suburban neighborhood, like 4-bedroom fucking houses and shit. And there was some dad, like, walked out of his garage and was like, fucking faggot. And I was like, you're like somebody's fucking dad. And then he started throwing rocks at me. He's like, get the fuck out of here. We don't want you in our fucking neighborhood. And I was like, just a fucking kid, man. I'm just a little fucking kid. I'm like fucking 14. Leave me alone, man. My life is hard enough. Like, I was like homeless at the time or something. And it was like, my shit's hard enough, man. Like, don't fuck with me, dude.
It is weird. It's like, I appreciate the struggle. I mean, being a metal kid in like 87, 88, it wasn't as bad, but there was definitely shades of that for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want anybody to have to go through that. That's fucking dumb, dude. Little kids have complex inner lives, and they should be able to express themselves, whether it's fucking being non-binary or coloring your fucking hair. It's just like, dude, this is how you figure it. This is how we figure it out. And now, you know, we're trying to make space for people to do that, and it's a great thing. I think it's like really cool, to be honest. You know?
Yeah. Well, I'm one of those. You know, I'm the type of person that, for me, anytime there's a topic that requires me to examine it, it always comes down to, does this give people more freedom or less freedom? And I always side with the more freedom of aspect of everything. So if somebody comes out as non-binary, somebody comes, you know, decides that they whatever it is they're going to do, it's like, that's more freedom. Like, I'm for that completely. I don't have to understand anything. You know, that's the other thing is people as human beings, we are often, even us with the best of intentions, it's very easy to be afraid of things that you don't understand.
Sure.
And so, you know, I think a lot of people never get past that lizard brain part of it. And they're like, I don't understand it. I'm not going to take the time to understand it.
It's bad.
It's fucking bad. And I don't want to know anything about it. And, you know, it's like, that's fucking, I'm not about that. I'm not for that.
No, that's just the worst thing. That's the worst way you can be. I mean, to me, it's like, I just think of it, you know, I'm a pretty simple guy, but the way I look at it is like, most people hear Napalm Death Peel sessions and think this is just horrible noise. Why would you listen to it? Whereas I listen to it, I'm like, I think it's great. So clearly,
it was a pretty seminal moment in my life, actually, was when the first time I heard, because I used to tape trade with the guys from Sticky, and we were friends.
Oh yeah.
And
Chris Dodge's whole band, right?
Yeah, Chris Dodge, Chris and his brother. Well, no, Chris and the Weiler brothers. And
Okay.
And like, you know, they gave me a tape that was like Napalm Death, the Peel sessions on one side, and like Extreme Noise Terror on the other side. And I was like, fuck. Like, you know, like No Warning was going strong, and I thought we were like fast and gnarly. And I heard that, I was like, to rethink all of this.
Right.
And then the rest of the band were like, no, we want to like, and then they ended up sounding like the band they turned into after it ended up sounding like Alice in Chains. So I think I got out about the right time.
Well, you know, they were making the right move for their career, though, I guess.
Well, I mean, it was all fine. Like I was having a kid, and like I had to. It was time for me to quit anyway. But the conversations leading up to like in the summer of '88, I was like, well, you have to listen to this Nihilist cassette, and you have to listen to this Napalm Death stuff, and like this is where I want to go. And they were all like, oh no, no. And I was like, well, fuck.
It was actually pretty similar, like when we were starting to jam the band that became Exhumed. Like, it was like me and Cole, our original drummer who played on the first 3 records, and then the other guys. And me and Cole, this was like 89 going into 90. We're like, okay, here's Bolt Thrower, here's Carcass, here's Napalm Death, here's Terrorizer. And they're like, well, I don't know, man. Like, I really like, you know, just stay with like Creator and stuff. And I was like, that's not enough anymore. Like, that's not enough. Like, there's a whole other realm to explore here. And so those guys ended up leaving, and we persevered on, and here we are 30 years later.
Yeah. Well, you know, if you had some kind of insight, you could have been like, well, in just a few years, Carcass is going to put out a record called Heartwork, and it's going to sound a lot like Creator.
And, right. You guys will like it.
It'll come back around. Just hang out for a while.
Right.
I actually love Heartwork. It's, you know, I really love Heartwork. I actually love the band that they became, you know, over the years. I'm a lifer with Carcass for sure.
Heartwork is my second favorite Carcass record behind Symphonies, which usually surprises people, but that's all right.
You know, that's okay. I like Swan Song a lot.
I do too. I think that album's killer, man.
The riff heaviest fucking Carcass record of all of them.
Yeah, it's like the heaviest like rock record. And actually the lyrics I think are really fucking good on that record.
Yeah.
Like pure like punk rock, super dry, you know.
Yeah. Super. Yeah. And
so,
getting to see Carcass and have Exhumed as the opener at the Troubadour was for sure one of my, like, as like, you know, as a fan, you always think like, oh, I would love to see this band with this band. You know what I mean? And it's like, when I got that moment, I was like, it was like a perfect 10. I was like, yes.
That was a really good weekend. That was an extremely fun weekend.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. And, you know, and then hanging out, and like you were living in LA at the time, and like going back to your apartment with everybody and hanging out, and like that was super fun. Like I was a good time for sure. Marissa was down. It was like fucking awesome.
That was the weekend that made it so I was not living in LA anymore because
you got kicked out. I heard, right?
After the Troubadour show, there was like 40 people in a 1-bedroom apartment, and people like passing out on the lounges by the pool and stuff. And that was actually what did it. It wasn't the noise. But yeah, so that was my very short-lived stint of living in Los Angeles.
You were literally living in Hollywood. You had your Hollywood moment for like a moment.
Yep, it was like a month or something, not at the most.
And you know, you get to share a place with Alex. That's always going to be.
That's an adventure.
Yeah. It's going to be a lot of adventures. So there's gonna be capers involved in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
love that guy. He's the best. Like I've had some of the most insane fucking things that have ever happened to me in Los Angeles. I've lived here for 25 years, and there are things that happened when I was hanging out with Leon and Alex that never happened before, and it never happened ever again.
Yes.
That was, and then he's in Pounder too, right? So it's like you are still in a band with Alex. Shout out, Alex.
He recorded the last Exhumed record. He's recording the record we're in the middle of right now, and obviously he's recorded the Pounder stuff. And yeah, it's funny because he's in. I think he just moved to Albany, but he was somewhere in the Berkeley area. So he's in the Bay Area now, and I'm down here, so it's sort of odd. But yeah, I love that guy. I mean, he also did like front of house for Exhumed for years, you know.
Yeah. He's like, he's like Carcass's sound guy. Like, you got to be pretty good at what you do to get that gig.
He's very good.
Yeah.
It's just, but yes, there's a lot of shenanigans, a lot of tomfoolery, a lot of the horseplay, all that stuff. Grab ass,
Yeah, like all of us, like over the years, have had a lot of, we have a good friend group. There's always usually, I'm looking forward to bands being able to be back in LA playing again, and seeing everybody and like hanging out and having a good time, because it's like, the goalie mask business like took away all of my personal life for like 7 years,
right?
And so I don't really have that now. So when bands are in town, I'll actually be free enough to go see people, I wish there was a good venue in the valley, like we were talking about. Wish there was another Cobalt. There's only a couple of bars, and they aren't big enough for anything near what you guys bring to the table.
We actually played. I always keep saying last year, but it's like now 2019 or 2018. I can't remember. We played in Apple Valley.
Oh.
That was a very
So
weird
it was
show.
just a bunch of kids on methamphetamine.
Yeah, well, it was
guessing.
weird because it was kind of like it was basically like a filler date, because we had the LA date at the Echo fell on whatever day, and we ended up it was supposed to fall on the day we played in Apple Valley, but it's supposed to probably fall on the Friday instead. It fell on the Saturday or something. So we ended up in Apple Valley, and we played this like restaurant bar thing, and they're like, well. And it was really cold. It was like January or February. It was fucking freezing. And they're like, well, we sold over 100 tickets, so we have to put you outside. And I was like, it's like 38 degrees. Like,
yeah, that's the desert.
Work.
That's legitimately the fucking desert.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're on stage with like, heat lamps, like in restaurants, and like we're all playing in jackets and hoodies and shit. And the audience is standing there shivering. And I was like, okay, so, we're going to play like 18 songs. It's like, we're going to play like 12 songs, maybe 13, because it's fucking unbearable. I was like, just give like the 7 people beyond the first 100, just pretend they're not here and put us fucking inside, and it'll be really fun, But yeah, it was a very, very weird night.
Even drawing 100 people out there that's pretty good.
Yeah, I was. I mean, that's the thing. It's like it could have turned out to be a really fun show, but instead it was just a night that we all
Everybody
froze.
was too cold.
Yeah. At least at the time, Sebastian was still our new guitar player, and at least he got laid that night. So that was like that was a win. I was like, all right, well, it's a good.
Yeah, that kid rips, man. He was a good find for you guys.
He's great.
That's one of the things I love.
Right?
What's that?
You like Noisem, his other band? Right?
Yeah. Fuck yeah. Noisem's awesome for sure. Yes, absolutely. That's one of the things that I like about Exhumed, that for me, it like likens you guys a little bit to like Melvin's, is that it's like you have a family of musicians that kind of come and go over time. And, like every lineup is special in its own way and has almost its own sound, but still sounds like Exhumed. And I always thought that was really cool. That was like a cool thing about Exhumed, It's like sometimes Ross is the bass player in the Fog Monster, and sometimes it's Leon, and sometimes it's fucking Bud, and then sometimes Bud's playing guitar, and like you never know where.
I think the best thing I ever heard as far as that goes is. I was told by a journalist, I forget who, he's like, you guys are basically like the American grindcore version of Deep Purple. And I was like,
yo, fuck yeah, I'll take it.
If you ever see, there's like a chart of like the Deep Purple like family tree, and it's just so crazy, and it branches off into so many other bands between, Rainbow and Sabbath and Whitesnake and on and on and on. And, people coming and going, and they're here, then they're back, and so it's pretty cool. It's cool that we all like each other enough to circulate like that, and it's cool that I like the fact that the band is flexible enough. I'm not going to tell somebody with like, you got to quit your job or you can't be there for the birth of your nephew or whatever, because we have this tour. It's like, hey, if you have something to do, I get it. We're not making $1 million here. Like, we'll work with it, and I think we have a pretty stable lineup right now, and it's been stable for quite a while. But every time I say that, something happens, so I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, I think once you got Mike on drums, like I think almost anything can happen now, and like you and Mike can figure it out. You know what I mean? Like he's so good, and he's such a solid dude. Like solid dude.
It's nice to have that confidence. Just that sort of baseline stability, and it's something that. When we split up for 5 years, we never had in the sort of early part of the band. And now just knowing like I'm sitting here in our recording studio / screen printing shop / gear storage, merch warehouse, bullshit, whatever. Just knowing that we have that and we have, a good, a great core group and a good sort of extended network in case of emergency or whatever. And we can operate in a way that makes sense for everybody, whether it means if someone can't do tour X, someone else can step in and it's still somebody that's part of the family. It's a really good feeling, it's kind of weird, and the fact that we're still in a good position 1.5 years after not playing shows, that feels even better. I shouldn't say this because some lightning's gonna strike or something, but
you've always got Pounder.
Exactly, I've always got Pounder.
You got a fallback band now,
right? Actually,
you've always had fallback bands like you Decapitator and shit, but
I was actually thinking about Pounder earlier when we were talking about the gatekeeping thing, because one of the things that we were talking with the label that we work with Pounder was Shadow Kingdom Records. We told them, like, don't advertise features members of Carcass, Exhumed, so on. Like, don't include that, because there's going to be a certain segment of the true metal scene or traditional metal, whatever you want to call it, that's going to be like, oh, this is just like some posers like trying to like cash in or do something ironic or whatever. Right. And I was like, that's not what we're trying to do. And we just want people, if they don't like the band, that's totally fair. I just want them to give us a shot on our own merits, kind of thing.
Yeah. So, for anybody who's listening who wouldn't be familiar with Matt's other band, Pounder, they're more of a traditional heavy metal band that, in the vein of a band like Raven or Iron Maiden or, right. Grim Reaper or any of those kind of like, I don't want to say they're like a retro band, but the sound harkens back definitely to like early 80s heavy metal before there was like thrash metal or speed metal or any of that shit. It's just, right. It's heavy metal. Like and so, yeah, I get what you're saying. Like,
yeah, the way I always describe it to people is I call it metal, like metal with a hard T, because, if you say like, oh, I'm into metal, it's like, well, do you like Slipknot? Do you like Metallica? Do you like Slayer? Do you like fucking Necrot? But if you say I'm
Mastodon, whatever,
right, I'm into metal, you're like, oh, so you like Accept and Loudness and Manowar and Sabotage and Fluffy Bang, Comb in the Back Pocket, Trans Am metal. Like that's like what we
Chain
play.
Wallet.
Yeah,
although the Chain Wallet's got totally taken over by the grunge rock scene.
Parking lot metal.
The parking lot metal. Yes, dude, that's really good
that was fucking
description. Parking lot metal is a very good description of what Pounder is.
Totally, it's the other thing with the grunge thing too is flannels, because I always wore flannels, dude. Like,
it was definitely, yeah.
So I still wear flannels all the time. I don't really care. I keep thinking that it's gonna like come back in style more, but apparently it doesn't. Never.
Oh, it's a weird thing. Is grunge rock is coming back with the kids?
Is it coming
There's
back?
like grunge rock bands coming out that are like just trying to look and sound as much like Nirvana and that shit as possible. And the grunge rock thing's kind of it was the melding of metal and punk rock that Crossover was. just different punk rock and different metal. And
yes.
so for me, when I was growing up and I was like 19 or whatever, and that stuff started coming out, I still got it just as it made as much sense to me as I was like, oh, this is like Aerosmith metal and fucking, you know, like Suicide.
Dinosaur Jr.
You know what I mean? It's like different kind of punk, different kind of metal or rock mixed together. You know, it's like you listen to the first Nirvana record and it's like, it's like almost like proto stoner rock. You know what I mean? It's like, you could see where a band like Caius came from that.
Right.
Even though if you sat down and thought about it, you would never think those two bands sounded all alike, but they do more than you think. You know what I mean?
I always thought Nirvana was actually really good. Like
such a good band.
You know, like a lot of that stuff didn't really stick with me.
No, almost none of it. Like, you know, for me, it's like Tad, Mudhoney, Nirvana. Those are the grunge rock bands. Almost everything else for me was like something else. Like I don't consider like Pearl Jam or Soundgarden area. I should be grunge rock, really. Just rock.
It was like cock rock, kind of like dressed up, like dirtied up a bit or whatever. Although I do like Soundgarden, but yeah,
nothing after Bad Motorfinger really though.
Grunge.
Bad Motorfinger is like it's practically a Sabbath record.
It practically is a Sabbath record, like straight. Because I remember kids in my high school like, "Oh, dude, have you heard this?" I'm like, "Isn't this just like a Sabbath riff, dude?" Like,
dude, yeah. I mean,
but you know, everything old is new again, and it's always been a recycling.
Well, it kind of goes with the overall conversation that where we've been talking about everything. Makes perfect sense. But yeah, like grunge rock's it's coming back.
I'm actually surprised it's taken this long because I've already seen people talking about like Slipknot and Mudvayne and stuff like nostalgically, which is weird.
That's, I think, well, if you talk to Travis from Cattle Decapitation, who kind of tours on a larger level than some of our other friends, like he's like, oh, no. Nu metal's never went away in most of the country. It's still just as big as when Slipknot was a thing in 2000. He's like, oh, those same people exist and they still listen to that same shit.
I mean, it's just kind of like, I'm sure in 1995, if you go to Omaha, Nebraska, you're like, why the fuck are people still jamming like Hysteria and the self-titled Whitesnake album? Like it just came out, you know, like there's a huge swath of the country that's culturally much behind. Yeah, I definitely like in a place like Omaha, Nebraska or something, like nu metal is still there for sure, totally, which is weird. But
yeah, I mean, well, you know, my sons are of that age where, you know, that was the music that was like around. They kind of ended up being more into like the hardcore scene, you know, like, or even
it's a relief.
Like I, you know, me and Leon talked about this a little bit one time where it's like, there's a whole bunch of people who think emo is like bands like Under Oath. And like, that's not emo's like at the drive-in. At the
drive-in? Is that an emo band? Okay.
Yeah, like Fugazi is a real emo band, and At the Drive-In is like an emo band. Boy Sets Fire, bands like that. And then there were those screamo bands, you know, and it's like, you know, like Under Oath and fucking Silverstein and all that shit, the white belt stuff that so many people did not like from the death metal scene.
It's really funny because I can honestly say, with the exception of Fugazi, like I've never heard any of those bands. Like
you should listen to At the Drive-In. I think you would like them. Those dudes can play their fucking instruments, man.
I very well might. I just think, you know, I like went into a cave in like 1994, and I just sort of was like, okay, like death metal is not really popular anymore. Like my favorite bands have all sort of changed their style. Like, what am I going to do? And I was like, all right, I'm going to double down. I'm just going to like get weird. I'm going to start buying vinyl because it's so cheap. And, you know, I just sort of missed as much of that stuff. I mean, I couldn't tell you like a Korn song or a Deftones song either. Like, I know I've heard Slipknot before because people have played it for me. And I'm sure I probably heard those other bands, but I don't know anything about them. I never got into it. I mean, I heard like, you know, I guess it was Limp Bizkit and, Linkin
Oof.
Park I heard on the radio, but I don't know anything about them. You know, I recently found out like a year ago that someone in 311 died. Everyone at my work was like, "You don't know about so and so?" I was like, "Dude, I don't know anything about any of that, and I'm perfectly content not knowing shit, man. Just being in my own bubble, it's fine."
Yeah, and my son's kind of ended up. I mean, I did that a little bit too, for sure. But there was like this kind of like, oh, I don't even know what anybody calls it, but there are bands like Poison the Well and like 18 Visions. It was like somewhere between hardcore, and there was like more. There was clean singing in it, but there was like also a super crazy like extreme metal element to it. And these were the bands that they were putting on tour with, like you get those package tours where it's like
Sure.
Cryptopsy and fucking Poison the Well and you know, it was like the death metal hardcore crossover shows that happened a lot, like between like 99 and like, you know, those big package tours. But my sons were more into those bands like Poison the Well, and I really like Poison the Well, and they are playing at Psycho Las Vegas. First time they played live in a long time, and they're playing at Psycho Las Vegas in August, and I get to see them do it. I'm pretty excited about that. And then some of the other like legit emo bands like Boy Sets Fire are playing that, and like what was the other one, Thursday, and some of those other like, you know, proper emo bands. Like I could never get into like a lot of those screamo bands, like, you know, My Chemical Romance and fucking you know, Under Oath and shit like that. That was, I was like, no. The Hot Topic bands, like I couldn't, like I get why that was so reviled in the scene for so long.
I mean, I just find it more. I find it more interesting just seeing how, you know, everything sort of recycles, you know, and how that's sort of always how it has been, you know. Yeah, I always just think back, like, you know, in the 70s, Happy Days was on TV, right? And in the 80s,
in the 50s,
right? And in the 80s, they had the Wonder Years. And then in the 90s, they got really lazy and they just called it That 70s Show. Like they were just out of names. So there's always been like a recycling element to pop culture, and it's just really interesting because now
people want a little taste of their past, and it's like, you know, that this whole it's funny, like when I'm gonna have Matt Harvey or anybody else on my show, like I try not to think too hard about what it is that we're going to talk about. Like, I don't want to do an interview show, right? Like, I don't want to be like, we're going to talk about this and we're going to talk about this. I knew for sure we're going to talk about your writing, and then it's going to go wherever it goes. And it's kind of amazing how we kept this whole theme going for like an hour and a half. And like, it ended up being perfect. I love it. Like, how many times are you going to get to listen to Matt Harvey talk about, you know, life and pop culture? Like, I'm sure most of the time you go on podcasts and everybody's like, okay, so on Slaughter Cult, like what fucking effects pedal were you using? I'm like,
there's definitely a bit of that, you know. I mean, it's for me, I don't mind talking about whatever. I just, you know, the questions I just get tired of is like when they're like, oh, so how did the band form? Like, what were your influences? Like, okay, dude, come on, bro. Like, ask me about anything else, like anything. Come on, you know. But to me, though, it's like none of it is separate from each other. Like all these things sort of inform each other, and you know, as far as my perception of pop culture, because so much of what I am concerned with is pop culture, whether it's comics, music, writing, horror movies, whatever. It's all sort of wound up together, and I don't really see. I've gotten to the point now where, like, aside from, I guess, like sorting riff and lyric ideas into different bands, there's no real separation of anything anymore. It's just sort of like, do I like it? Does it resonate with me? Am I excited about it? And cool, you know, whether it's a writing project or a music thing, and I guess now having the wherewithal to do more things, that I guess when I was younger, I would have like given my left arm to be in the situation I'm in now. Like I have a record deal. I go on tour. I have my own studio. I got like fucking 7 guitars laying around, like whatever, that's the dream. And to sort of not use it, especially when I don't have kids, it's like to not take advantage of that to the fullest just seems like a waste, especially because I'm 45 now. It's like there's no longer infinite time to get all this stuff done. So it's time to, if you're gonna do it,
you're on the clock now, buddy.
Right. It's like I don't have the time to waste, being like, I'm going to save my failing relationship by moving to Hawaii for a year and a half. I don't have a year and a half to piss away anymore. So it's just, that's just life. And, part of me wishes maybe I had a little bit more discipline earlier on, but it's like, how can you learn it without the experiences that you've had? So it is what it is,
That's that whole, if I knew then what I know now, right. What I mean? It's like, you could do that shit to your fucking blue in the face, and it's not, it doesn't matter. I think if I could pick one single thing to tell my younger self from when I was getting a grown man throwing rocks at me in suburbia because of my fucking hair, it would be, nobody is paying attention to what you're up to. Nobody's watching what you're doing. Nobody's keeping track of tabs on everything you're doing. Care less about what you think people think of you. You know what I mean? It's like you put out the projects that you put out and you want people to care about that stuff. But as far as like your life, like going about your life, like nobody fucking cares. Nobody's paying attention. Right. Like just live your life and do the things that you want to do, and don't worry so much about what everybody thinks. It's just like you just only have one of these. You only get so right. It's a thing that I say a lot on the show, and it's usually a pretty good closer. So maybe that's where we're at in the conversation. But time is the only thing that a human being can never get more of, ever. You get right. the amount that you got. And, to waste somebody's time, to me, is the highest crime. That's like, that's just the worst thing you can do to somebody, is waste somebody's time, because it can't get any more of it. Can't get any back.
So if you've listened to this whole episode, I apologize for wasting your time.
We've just sucked away an hour and a half. Tell me, how does it feel?
Gotcha, sucker.
But also to share your time with somebody, it is something that I appreciate, and I appreciate you sharing your time with me. For the third attempt.
No, it's seriously a pleasure. It's like I've listened to a few of your episodes. I'm not really a podcast guy, but I've listened to a few of your episodes, especially with people that I know, because I'm like, this is so fun. It's like hanging out with a couple of my friends for an hour and a half, except I can't say anything because sometimes I want to, like, I found myself being like, when it was you and Leon, I was like, blah, blah. I was like, oh, I'm just like sitting here with headphones on at work, like soldering something. Like they can't hear me. But
we are not sitting at Leon's table in his apartment in Echo Park right? with 1,000 empty beer cans at 4:30 in the morning.
Well, hopefully we can be in some variation of that again soon.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think I've ever been more excited to like resume touring. It's been a long, weird year and a half. So it's we're supposed to be going out in October, like late October and November. So with any luck, that will be a thing that happens.
Dude, that would be rad. And you guys always play in Los Angeles, so wherever it is that you guys play, and this year I'm making a vow to try to get out to more shows, more shows than I have previously, just because it's one of those things, like sometimes you don't know what you were missing until you can't have it. Absolutely. It's like I ignored shows forever because I was like, I'm busy, I'm fucking tired, I'm busy, I'm tired, I'm busy, I'm tired. And then once I couldn't go out to shows, I was like, that's all I want to do.
Right. I mean, you just always think, oh, next time, you know,
Dude.
and especially if you live in Los Angeles, because there's like 3 killer shows a week, and you'll never be able to go to all of them. But yeah, you know, it's like fucking, you don't know what you got till it's gone.
I hate that band.
I mean, you know, that's probably the best Aerosmith song not written by Aerosmith.
Yeah, I always thought of that band was like, if fucking Brian Johnson sang for Aerosmith, then you got fucking,
yeah.
What was that? Cinderella,
sounds about right? Yeah.
Because that guy had like a serious AC/DC vibe to his fucking vocal style.
He really did. Like of all the singers like that I've tried to imitate for fun or for laughs at a party, Tom Kiefer from Cinderella hurts my throat the most. And I'll say that as a death metal singer. I'm like, ow, dude, I can't talk. I've just seen it. I don't know how that guy did it, but it's something.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I know, I won't even go down that road. I was never a huge hair metal fan, and I don't want to open up a whole nother fucking Pandora's box of conversation. I just, it was like, it meshed up way too much with me liking bands like Dismember for me to have like appreciate that stuff at all. But anyway, I try, I probably listen to more of that type of thing now than I probably ever have before, but I don't listen to a lot of hair metal bands at all. But I do like Pounder. Not that it's the same thing.
I'm on the show.
Yeah. Like it's one of those things like, you talk about being able to go out and do things, but I'll also be able to have people in here to record live episodes. Right. So in October time, if you guys have an afternoon, and you want to come inside, then maybe we'll do it that way next time.
Dude, have you had Ross on the show yet?
No, I haven't.
You really should. He's
a
great
for
artist.
Sure.
He does his fucking action figure photography. He just recreated the entire movie of The Thing with G.I. Joes on Instagram, and it's amazing.
Yeah, he's like building all these elaborate fucking diorama sets and shit. It's really cool. It's really good stuff.
It's fantastic stuff. And it's like,
he's one of the smartest, most talented people that I know for sure. So yeah, it's just a matter of, I can't have everybody on
of course
all the time. So it's like, I have to spread people out a little bit, but Ross is on the list for sure.
Okay, good. Well, I'm pitching him just in case he wasn't. So I would love to hear that episode.
Of course he is. Of course Ross is. Me and Ross actually, it's like a weird thing. Like I was saying before when I met him and I was like, oh, you're like a crust dude. Like I just like known him online as an artist, like, and then I didn't even know he was like in Exhumed and Impaled, like until I knew him as an artist for kind of a while. And then I was like, oh shit, you're in bands I like. And then when I met him, I was like, oh shit, like, it was like, and then I didn't even know that he was, I didn't even know who his sister was until fucking way later. And I was like, oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, hey, we're all South San Jose kids.
Yeah. I didn't know Marissa was also like, I didn't know. Like you guys were after me, you know what I mean? You guys were like 5 years younger than me. So like, I was already like, I had kids and shit by the time you guys started making bands. And so, I was like, you guys lived where? Right by Branham High School? Like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah. I mean, Ross lived right in the same neighborhood down off Santa Teresa. I lived right across the street from Pioneer. Cole lives right on the other side of Pioneer. Our original guitar player lived by Gunderson. This will only be of interest if it makes the cut. It will only be of interest to people who've lived in San Jose. It's like, I remember as a teenager, and I would hear like my dad or my grandpa like talking to their friends like, oh yeah, so and so from over there, and like, they just turned that goddamn orchard into a fucking Chevy dealership. Oh, I used to fool around with this gal back then. I was like, would you old people shut up? And I was like, oh God, when did I start doing that? Like, fuck.
Well, dude, all of my friends went to Gunderson. I didn't have hardly any friends at the high school I went to at Oak Grove. I was like, no, there were like no other punks at that school. Like there were kids who were kind of into it a little bit, but there was nobody as like committed to being a punk rocker like I was. So all the kids that I knew that were in bands and stuff, like they all went to Gunderson. So like I had to skate or bus from where I was at all the way over there. I had to go through some fucking treacherous neighborhoods, man. Guns pointed in my face and shit. Yeah, people think the South Side's all suburbia, but hey, man.
I was to say, nobody like that can afford to live in South San Jose anymore, so it's completely safe.
Yeah, I mean, my parents are still right there, like right off of Capitol. Like, they moved out of the house that I grew up in, but they're still like right by all the dealerships. Like they're right next to the 87. Like literally, you look at the wall of the freeway from their front yard.
Oh wow! And of course, that wasn't there when we were all growing up. That was like a new thing.
Dude, one of the first pictures of No Warning was taken on one of those over ramps that didn't have
construction.
Yeah, there was no end to it. Was like it just dropped off, and like we like climbed through fences and shit and got up in there and took one of those pictures like on the freeway overpass.
That is appropriate setting for you guys. That's like perfect.
Yeah. And total weird digression. Right where the 87 goes through there was one spot right by Gunderson that actually was closer to Oak Ridge. It was like just off over from Oak Ridge. And there was like a half pipe there that some kids built in this empty, just an empty lot called the Pine Tree Ramp. And it was like this half pipe. And like we skated all the time. That was one of our local spots. And then it had to get torn down for the freeway to go through. And we were like, fucking freeway. Fucking bullshit.
What do these people want to get to work? I'm trying to skate here, fucking you losers.
Yeah, and then the other thing that tied into that was that the when they were doing all of that, because they were revitalizing downtown, like shit was going crazy, and like between like 85 and 95, and the slogan for that was San Jose is growing up. And it was like, this signage everywhere was like, San Jose is growing up. And we would all, being the fucking dickhead punks, we're like, San Jose is throwing up.
That's quite good. I like that. The thing that San Jose had, because it was sort of like it was like a cultural wasteland, really. Like Oakland and SF had all of this sort of music and arts, but San Jose had a lot of skateboarders. That was like kind of our one sort of cool thing in the 80s.
It was our export.
Yeah. Because I mean, like, when you think about like mostly, I guess I think in terms of Bay Area metal bands, but there was not one from San Jose. Everybody was from, Pinole or Richmond.
Till we showed up. Till No Warning showed up on the scene.
Right. I mean, even the peninsula was pretty barren. There was like Epidemic. And Immortal Fate.
Hellhound.
Okay. All right. I never.
Anxiety. There was a few. Xanthus.
Oh, I remember them. Yeah.
Warfare
fucking DC.
Steve Esquivel.
Oh, he was in Anxiety. Okay.
Well, no, he was in Xanthus. He was the singer for Xanthus.
Oh,
and then he left and he was in Defiance. Defiance is where he went after that, and then he went to Skin Lab.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve, it's my dude. Right. Known that dude. Right. Like I remember, like when No Warning first started playing shows, it was the same time when Xanthus first started playing shows, and so we played together a lot in basements and shit.
I remember seeing Defiance. I won tickets from either the high school or the college radio station. I saw
fucking Brain Pain on KSJ.
I think it was Brain Pain, and I saw him right when Void Terra Firma came out at the Stone, and I was in the front row, and I remember that dude Steve, he stepped on my hand and he didn't realize it, so he was standing on my hand for like 30 seconds. And so I was always like, fuck that guy for years. I was like, fuck that guy. And then I finally met him years later, and he was like the sweetest dude. He was like super nice. And I was just like, oh, well, all right. I guess don't take that personally when you're 14 or whatever.
That's fucking like 99% of us. You meet somebody and you're like, God, that's like the nicest person. Right? You know what I mean? It's like, it's been talked about on this show before numerous times that like, like all of my favorite people who I adore and have the strongest friendships with, they're all like dudes in the gnarliest death metal bands. And you guys are like all like the nicest, smartest people I know. Like, Like you put the brain power of Sean McGrath and fucking Leon and Ross in the same room, and it's like
that's
like
a lot of
fucking brain trust. And you get Call in there, and you get fucking Widener in there, and it's like you get Marissa in there, and it's like you know, we went to at Leon's wedding. There was like the night before, and we were all hanging out, and I'm at that picnic table at that bar with all of you, and I'm like this, if everybody sitting here had taken a slightly different course, they'd be working at NASA or something. You know what I mean? Like
we would all probably be a lot richer, although some of us are doing pretty well. I mean, I'm doing very okay compared to the people I'm talking about. But and I'm also very far from the smartest person in that group that you just mentioned. And I'm okay with that. I'm kind of like the resident
you do just fine. You
guy.
can write books, and some of my Exhumed is my favorite American death metal band, so you did that.
So take that, Leon and Sean.
I do love Impaled, but Exhumed is that's my thing.
Well, thanks.
I mean,
I'll take
as good as you are, you're never going to be Entombed, but that's okay, and that's a totally different conversation.
Right. I mean, you know, that's fine.
I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you.
Hey, we don't have to be the best as long as we're.
No, you guys are my favorite American death metal band by a fucking large margin. You know that. I'm a huge Exhumed fan.
Thank you for saying that.
For sure. All right, man. I'm going to fucking let you go. It's been like 2 hours. I'm going to have to edit the shit out of this fucking video so people don't get fucking, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you coming on. And
absolute fucking pleasure, man. I wish we could be doing this in person, man.
Next time we will, for sure.
I will. I'll let you know when we get dates.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah. Look for us in October, November.
Cool. All right, man. I'll talk to you again very soon, Matt.
All right, buddy. Take care, man. Thanks.
Yep.